In this session, I want to talk to you about the flower. The flower room is where most cultivators focus as it's the financial room, right? This is where we're growing the product. But this is also the room that poses the most challenges. And sometimes those challenges are hard to overcome, right? So I kind of want to talk to you about the challenge, right? Aspergillus, yeast and mold, big challenge when it comes to a flower, right? So the Aspergillus can come in through HVAC systems. I've had customers that have sampled and found that the HVAC system is bringing in people that are tending the flower room product, right? So as they're going through, they're transferring Aspergillus. Organic growers, right? I have organic growers that talk about soil being a source for Aspergillus. And you want some Aspergillus in the soil, of course, but we don't need it to end up in the final product, right? We don't want it in the bud. So foot traffic, water, soil, HVAC, just air exchange, right, can be a major source for Aspergillus, yeast, and molds, botrytis, powdery mildew, etc. Right? One of the challenges is that this will build on the flower as the stages, as you bring it in a veg plant and you're working all the way to late flower, right? This is the whole cycle. The surface is changing, right? More leaves, the bud is forming, and the bud actually encapsulates potentially the mold and the powdery mildew that might get, or the Aspergillus in the room. Once it's encapsulated, now it's more difficult, obviously, to remove in post-harvest. We'll talk about that in another session. So it's not just at harvest that you're going to have the mold, right? This is something that starts day one and the spores grow. And as the environment needs change, maybe you're following VPD programs that you need to hit the right level of VPD. So your humidity, if it spikes, or you have an accidental, environmental sometimes don't do what they're supposed to do. Now all of a sudden, all the spores that were dormant are instantly activated, right? We want to stop that type of process. This is the challenge, right? Ultimately, if you fail a state test, depending on what state you're in, you could lose the whole crop, or you have to at least downgrade, right? You might have to go to extraction. You might have one chance at remediation. It's a failed crop is a major event to happen, right? This is the challenge of a room, especially some of you that are doing larger rooms, right? Multi-state operations and multiple growers, right? Flowerings. Some of the challenges also that you'll have, and could be a challenge even as I talked about some of the solution, is airflow, right? So managing the airflow in those rooms becomes a big challenge. You need to make sure air is moving. But the higher you move the air, sometimes the more you spread the spores, more the PM spreads, right? So it can become more of a challenge to have a higher airflow because of that, the problem that exists in the room from the beginning. So I want to talk to you about why it persists, right? So if you're trying to do only cleaning of the room between cycles, great and all, because you're starting at zero. But the problem starts to show up, and now you cannot do a full clean. You can't do a deep cycle clean, right? The flower room is in operation, especially some of my customers, which I'm sure some of you do the same thing, where we actually have perpetual harvest, right? You're bringing in plants and harvesting continually in the room. Real hard to stop a room that's a perpetual harvest and start over, right? So that's a challenge why it persists. But it doesn't, obviously that, like I'm saying, that's a one-time clean, not a continual clean, right? There are other systems like if you're using carbon or HEPA filtration, which will filter out pathogens, yeast, mold, pollen even, dust, particulates in the air. That's great, except for it's not addressing the surface issue, which on the leaves, powdery mildew pops up. Aspergillus is on the plants, right? This is where like we talked about soil, potentially the water, right? That might be the source of contaminant, the foot traffic that comes in. So those types of filtration systems do not address the problem where it's at, right? So that problem can still continue. So that's an issue. The fungicide programs, right? You can't run them continuously, right? You may go in and do a spray. You may have to let it dry. And then after it dries, nobody can enter, while this is happening, nobody can enter the room for a little while. You have challenges, right? They only last so long. So my goal has always been to lower the amount of chemical usage, the sprays that we're using, especially when it comes to late flower in a flower. You now can't apply some of these, even if they're organic in some ways. Sometimes you cannot add those for risk of the state testing. So post-harvest, now you have to have it tested, right? Anytime you look at a problem and are reactive. So I saw powdery mildew. I'm seeing botrytis. And now you're spraying to solve that problem. It's almost too, right? You've waited too long. You're not preventative. You're only reactive at this point. That's stressful. I hate being reactive, right? I like to do things on purpose. And so to react to a problem is not my ideal. So how I think AirROS fits for you, right? This is the way we do it, is if you have the AirROS system deployed from day one, we're now low and slow treatment, sanitizer constantly in the room. As you bring in the plants, expose them to this new environment. Obviously, you'll transition some of the environmental settings, but as you move them to this environment, there's stress that's happening. We want it to be a clean environment. So as you put them in day one, they're clean. And now my goal is to keep them clean through every week of growth, all the way through late flower, so that you have this protection and stop that mold and pathogen and virus pressure, right, that might be in there throughout this whole growth. As the foot traffic comes in, as you water, as the environmentals change, the reintroduction of like bringing Aspergillus into the room through an air exchange, for example, now becomes an easier solve because the room's already clean. Now all I have to deal with is what just came in through the door. That's it. What came in through the intake as a makeup area may kick on. We're really dealing with the problem live 24/7, right? This is constant low treatment. As the room is clean, now we just run when we need to, dynamically adjusting the system using a sensor. We do that, right? So we're adjusting to the environment and what is happening, right? So this is how I seek to do. We normally would mount our system and mount the diffusion of our system into your airstream, however it makes sense, right? Whether it's adding an inflatable sock, injecting into an existing duct or a sock, but it becomes above your canopy. So now the reactive oxygen and the sanitizer that is filling the room, let's say, is now in your airstream, touching everything, touching the canopy as the bud forms, as it's encapsulating. No spores get left behind, right? They don't get trapped inside. Very important later, right? As we go to state testing. So when you can't spray anymore, I like people to be able to stop spraying. But if you were able to spray to a certain point, but now late flower, you can't do it, your normal practices, we're there to help protect that and maintain everything you've done up to this point to ensure that the pressure is lower. Yeah, so that's how I feel like we fit, right? One of the things that I do get asked, and I've had crazy people test, is the humidity level, right? The higher the humidity, the more hydrogen peroxide will create, which allows you to not get the mold because we have more hydrogen peroxide, but you're able to get the humidity where you want to push your plant, the crop, steer it where you would like it to go, right? So ideally, humidity is a good thing that can be another tool while you have AirROS, whereas you might have to use humidity to reduce humidity to reduce mold. Now you could actually have the environment the plant would thrive in because you have the AirROS system, right? There are various people, and we can, there's testimony pages you can look at that have done this and have just implementing it from the beginning had consecutive. Like I remember the first year that we were in Primitive, it was 28 consecutive non-detectable tests using our system throughout multiple rings. So the flower room's critical, right? That's $1 million question. If I was going to put it in one spot, where would I put it? I still never come up with that exact answer because everybody's problem is slightly different. So as we understand your facility, flower rooms tend to be the room that is the most practical, right, to apply to because that's where the bud is formed. But then we'll talk about, as we go through the series, the other rooms post-harvest that can also cause you to fail, even though you've grown clean using the AirROS system. So we'll talk about that. So the changes, what changes that I see, I put down in my notes, ambient microbial load reduced continuously, right? This is something we're doing every day. Like I mentioned, 24/7, we're reducing that load, right? The load. And obviously you can hit your VPD targets safely, which could give you bigger flower. I don't like to claim higher yields, but we have a lot of customers that do have better terps, better profiles, flavor profiles, and have higher yields. Even if it's reducing your loss, that's a higher yield. Putting more plants. I've had people eliminate plants because they need safely to be able to grow without having much risk. Those kind of things can happen for you as well. We've seen that using our system.